Ukrainian soldiers have once again refuted the false statement made by the head of the Russian General Staff, Gerasimov, about alleged street fighting and clearing operations. This is in Kudkivka, Kharkiv region. The fighters note that the settlement is under the full control of the Ukrainian Defense Forces. No positions have been lost, and all enemy infiltration attempts are detected in time and stopped.
The information about the alleged capture of Kuchkovka is yet another element of the enemy's information and psychological operations and has nothing to do with the real situation. From a statement by the 16th Army Corps of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Telegram.
The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine notes that Russian occupiers have become more active in the southern Slobozhansky direction. They also point out that the situation remains difficult in the Pokrovsk sector. There, Ukrainian soldiers repelled a third of all Russian attacks recorded along the entire front line.
Our defenders are managing, despite such a large enemy grouping, and despite the fact that the enemy is trying to use everything they have, including mechanized equipment. And they have been able to accomplish this task since last year, shifting deadlines and everything else according to their own algorithm. For now, what's happening is that they are holding the northern outskirts of both Myrnograd and Pokrovsk under extremely difficult conditions. And this is made possible by the fact that issues are being resolved at the tactical and perhaps even operational level.
The Russian army is not stopping its unsuccessful attempts to amass resources in the Serebryansky forest and in the area around Siversk. This was reported by the air assault forces of the Ukrainian armed forces. They noted that in the area of the village of Dranivka in the Donetsk region, Ukrainian soldiers are engaged in round-the-clock positional fighting, inflicting losses on the enemy in both manpower and equipment.
The main objective of the Russian occupiers in this section of the front remains to control the coastal territories of the Seversky Donets and to secure positions on the commanding heights. The enemy's tactics remain unchanged. Small groups at 2 or more people attempt to infiltrate the space between positions. Units of the 81st Brigade detect Russian Army personnel and equipment and strike them. From a statement by the 81st Separate Air Mobile Slobozhanska Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces on Telegram.
Border guards reported the destruction of a latest Russian electronic warfare system called Tirada-2. The soldiers noted that, together with the drone systems battalion, the system was detected in the southern Slobozhansky direction. The fighters emphasized that yet another expensive enemy toy has been turned into a pile of scrap metal, just like the multiple rocket launcher system that the Russians unsuccessfully tried to hide among the destroyed houses. The soldiers note that they discovered the system while it was operating and destroyed the target with a precise strike. In addition, according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, along the entire front line, the defense forces shot down 1,012 Russian operational tactical UAVs in a single day. There's a strong enemy. Yeah, it's going down. Good job, guys. We've got contact. They also destroyed 4 armored vehicles, 22 artillery systems, and 79 units of Russian automotive and special equipment, as well as eliminated 690 Russian occupiers. Thus, the total combat losses of Russian troops in Ukraine have already exceeded 1,236,000 soldiers.
We have a guest joining us. Pavel Lakichuk, military security expert at the Strategy 21 Center. Pavel, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Likewise, good afternoon. Glory to the heroes.
Pavel, before we talk about the situation at the front, I'd like you to comment on the information we received about the loss of 2 aircraft, military planes, specifically a Su-30 and a Su-34. Of course, we're still waiting for more information to clarify certain details, since there are reports that 1 plane was lost by the Russian army, and there is information that it might be 2. But overall, how significant is this loss for the Russian Federation's army? Consider the concept of a unique item. How unique is this for Russia?
The first is the Su-30SM, obviously from the 43rd Naval Assault Aviation Regiment in Saki, which was destroyed, shot down by our air defense systems near Snake Island. The Russians produce approximately 2 units of Su-30SMs in a single day consistently over the course of the entire year. This means that losing even one is about half of Russia's total annual production of these highly advanced multi-role fighter aircraft. The second aircraft mentioned is the Su-34 Frontline bomber. It is quite obvious that it was carrying out strikes on Ukraine, Kabans as they're called, at some specific location where it was also destroyed, but for now, absolutely neither the location nor the specific details are known. The circumstances under which this plane was destroyed are also unknown. On average, they produce about 3 to 4 of these aircraft per year. You can roughly calculate it. Su-34. These aircraft are also extremely significant in the context of the deployment of aerial bombs on Ukraine. This is basically These are the planes that have become the main tool for waging an air war against Ukraine, for launching air attacks on our country. These are hundreds of bombs that are dropped every day.
Regarding the false statements made by Gerasimov about Kupiansk-Kozlovoy, supposedly captured by Russian troops, analysts from the Institute for the Study of War also point this out. They also refute these claims and note that they have found no evidence of a Russian presence. In Kupiansk-Kozlovoy, there are only signs of recent Russian infiltration missions on the approaches to the city. Moreover, these infiltration attempts, analysts note, were recorded at a distance of about 3.5 kilometers from the northern border of the settlement and about 8.5 kilometers from the eastern border. Kupiansk-Kozlovoy, how do you assess it? Why are these so-called captured territories being taken on credit? What do they provide? And to what extent do they continue to reinforce the confidence of the same dictator Putin that everything is going well at the front? Or is this not for domestic consumption, but more for foreign policy purposes, especially against the backdrop of ongoing negotiations to end the war?
I don't think it's Gerasimov. He wasn't trying to deceive anyone. On the contrary, he let something slip. The thing is, Russian generals, Putin, and others keep saying Kupiansk, Kupiansk, we're going to capture Kupiansk. But we, the experts, have always said that the main objective of the enemy's operations in this direction is. We are not talking about the city of Kupiansk itself, but rather the settlement of Kupiansk-Kozlovoy with its key railway junction, which is located about 5 to 7 kilometers away. It lies directly to the south of the city of Kupiansk. That's the strategically important target. From our perspective, it represents the vital strategic connection of our logistical supply chains in the Luhansk region with the Kharkov direction, running directly along the primary main railway line. And for the Russians, if they capture Kupiansk-Kozlovoy, this is the bypass railway from the north, from Vorozhba, also leading to Luhansk region, to the occupied territory. It provides them with the capability to strategically maneuver their military forces from their primary strategic deployment areas located in the Belgorod and Voronezh regions. They need this Kupiansk-Kozlovoy. But neither Putin nor Gerasimov, to be honest, really know the theater where the fighting is taking place. And Kupiansk, Kupiansk-Kozlovoy, to them. Frankly, it doesn't really matter. And here, instead of Kupiansk, I said Kupiansk-Kozlovoy, because on the map they say that Kupiansk-Kozlovoy is the main target there. That's where Gerasimov let it slip. The overall tactical situation in that specific direction has not experienced any significant or major developments recently. The systematic process of neutralizing and eliminating the Russian soldiers who managed to make it into Kupiansk, specifically into the city of Kupiansk itself, is currently ongoing. They are actively working to repel the ongoing military assaults from the area known as the so-called Northern Bridgehead on the Oskil River. But, among many other things, based on very recent activity in the region, it can be reasonably assumed that the Russians have partially shifted their strategy and stopped exclusively focusing their efforts on a single concentrated strike from the north. Now they are trying to find ways to squeeze through and penetrate however they possibly can all along the entire perimeter. Our bridgehead is on the eastern bank of the Oskil. Well, overall, everything else remains unchanged.
Well, Pavel, let's talk about the tactics used by the Russian Federation Army. Meanwhile, Russian troops on the Eastern Front are trying to infiltrate the rear of Ukrainian forces with small assault groups. They often disguise themselves as civilians, according to the Center for Countering Disinformation at the NSDC. Defense forces regularly disrupt such actions. Simultaneously, the invaders are trying to encircle Ukrainian positions and stretch the flanks. They use aerial bombs as well as attack drones for this. The Ukrainian armed forces are thwarting the invaders' plans. When I read through all of this information, I immediately have several important questions about how urgent the issue is regarding how to respond to people trying to get behind your lines. Break time equals 0.5s / but you simply do not really know who they are. Are they military or not really? Yeah, and obviously, the approach of the Ukrainian Defense Forces in this regard is, well, not exactly humane, but we always look at who it is and how to act, unlike how the Russian Federation behaves, especially when they even attack people with drones who are just trying to leave the occupation unarmed. We all saw those horrific scenes in the Sumy region, right? When a man was pulling his wife on a sled, and the family was attacked by a drone. I mean, what kind of monster do you have to be to do something like that? But the approach of the Ukrainian armed forces is different. But this does make the issue more acute. Pavel, is there any way to try to minimize this threat from Russia?
Well, indeed, the Russians are using these as tactical maneuvers, and they're making attempts to break through with mechanized columns. They haven't given up on that. Moreover, during the winter months, especially when considering the frozen or muddy conditions of the terrain, there have actually been many more frequently observed cases involving large-scale, heavy mechanized military vehicles, sophisticated heavy armored units, and various other equipment, especially in recent months. Other light vehicles, improvised buggies, and so on. And here the concept is simple. Get as close as possible. Break through to the positions of Ukraine's defense forces, because that equipment is going to be destroyed anyway. But the more distance the infantry units and soldiers can successfully cover on those vehicles, the less they will have to face the extreme danger of losing their lives later on, especially when small, isolated groups consisting of only 2 or 3 individuals try to slip into the vulnerable rear sections of our primary defensive lines. But the second option is the opposite. We abandon the armored vehicles, and only small groups of 2 or 3 are used, who have to cover about 7 to 8 kilometers, 5 to 7 to 8 kilometers, in order to infiltrate our rear. Well, that's also a hopeless endeavor, really. That's why only 1 out of 10 manages to break through. Well, that's their problem. The problem of using civilian clothing, especially in Pokrovsk, has also shown up in other directions. It happened in the past, too. Now, more and more often, the Russians use disguises. There have been reports of them changing into civilian clothes for camouflage on the Pokrovsk front. This really complicates our work. They're not stupid, after all. That's exactly why they dress up as civilians, to confuse our defenders. Ukrainians won't shoot at civilians. It's much harder to spot an enemy sabotage and reconnaissance group disguised in civilian clothes, but they do get detected and eliminated as well. It's also important to know for sure that a service member who has changed into civilian clothes is no longer considered a combatant. They lose their combatant status. And the fundamental principles protected by the Geneva Convention, specifically concerning the treatment of prisoners of war, as well as the established rules of war, are no longer considered to be applicable to them.